The flashing closing time light at Riverside Market was still blinking when Emily Carter vanished in the town of Brattleboro, Vermont. Population 12,062. The October night poured down the Connecticut Valley with a thin layer of cold mist and fog that blanketed Putney Road like a dull curtain. At 9:30 p.m., a local driver spotted the 17-year-old high school girl huddled in her thin jacket as she walked along the narrow stretch of road leading toward the residential area, her small backpack swaying with each familiar step. Emily had just finished her shift and was carrying several school notebooks items her family said she never left behind. The driver slowly passed by, his eyes still following her figure as it faded into the thin mist, the only moving streak on that dark road at the time. He could not have imagined that this would be the last image of Emily that night. What happened in the next 8 minutes would haunt Brattleboro for nearly a quarter of a century. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In October 1989, the town of Brattleboro in Vermont entered the final days of autumn with rapidly dropping temperatures and cold fog stretching across the roads around West River. In the context of a small, peaceful community that operated according to the familiar rhythm of the northeastern United States, Emily Carter, 17 years old, a senior at Brattleboro Union High School and a part-time worker at the Riverside Market grocery store on Putney Road, maintained her regular routine as she did every week. On the day of the incident, Emily arrived for her afternoon shift, completed inventory checks, and assisted at the checkout counter as usual. The store's shift log recorded that she left Riverside Market at 9:20 p.m., carrying a small crossbody bag and wearing a thick fabric jacket suitable for the chilly weather. The route Emily chose to walk home was her familiar path, just over a mile long, along Putney Road before turning into the southern residential area near the Linden Street intersection. Around 9:30 p.m., an independent witness, a driver passing through the area near the North Bridge over West River, reported seeing a girl matching the description walking close to the right shoulder of the narrow, poorly lit road, moving at a slow pace and apparently heading toward the residential area. This was the last recorded sighting of Emily that evening. By around 10 p.m., her family began to notice something unusual because Emily always arrived home before 9:50 p.m. and had never failed to notify them if she was running late. They tried calling the store's landline and contacting Emily's close friends, but no one knew where she was. By nearly 11:00 p.m., after driving themselves to check the nearby routes Emily usually took, but finding no sign that she had returned, the family's concern grew markedly. At 11:12 p.m., the Carter family decided to call the Vermont State Police and officially report Emily Carter missing. The Vermont State Police received the call at 11:13 p.m. and immediately that night opened an initial case file under the protocol for minors who failed to return home on time, while dispatching a patrol unit to the Carter residence to conduct the first verification steps. There, the on-duty officer recorded Emily's full identifying information, from physical description, height, and weight, to her most recent health status and school records. The family also provided context about her usual routine. Emily had a stable schedule, no history of running away, no serious conflicts, and nothing unusual that morning. Police verified Emily's evening commuting habits after work, noting that she typically walked along Putney Road due to the short distance and familiarity. They also inquired about close relationships, lists of close friends, homeroom teachers, co-workers at Riverside Market, and found no signs of conflict or reasons for her to separate from her family. When inventorying the items Emily carried when leaving the store, the family reported that she usually had a small crossbody bag containing her wallet, keys, a school notebook, and sometimes a novel she was reading. Police added this list to the report as a basis for comparison if evidence was found along the route. Based on information about her usual route, police established a Level 1 search perimeter focused on the section of Putney Road from Riverside Market to the Carter residential area, including the West River Bridge area and both shoulders where lighting was poor, assessed as high-risk spots for incidents. They marked on the map dark locations, blind spots, turns into the Green Mountain Forest, and areas with steep terrain near the riverbank that could cause slips. Given Emily's age and the very short time frame from leaving work to going missing, the responsible unit classified the case as missing juvenile priority, requiring an urgent response and immediate search deployment that night. The on-duty team promptly prepared personnel including patrol officers, a K-9 unit, and a mobile lighting support team. On the quick info board, the commanding officer outlined 3 main search directions along Putney Road, the West River Bridge area, and the adjacent Eastern Forest region. Units were clearly assigned: check the roadway for dropped items, review routes with traffic cameras, and knock on doors of nearby homes to record evening activity. By dawn, the initial plan was finalized, and search forces were placed on standby for deployment to gather any signs related to Emily Carter's disappearance. The next step in the verification process was to reconstruct an accurate timeline for the critical 20-minute window between Emily leaving Riverside Market and the last witness sighting on Putney Road, as this was considered the highest risk period likely containing developments leading to the disappearance. Early the next morning, the assigned officer returned to the store to check the sign-out log and confirm the end of shift time through two sources: the paper time clock system and the work schedule set by the manager. Both matched, recording that Emily finished her shift at 19 p.m. and left the store around 19 p.m. and after handing over the counter to the night shift. From that data, police began collecting detailed statements from those who had direct contact with Emily in the final stage of her shift. A coworker who worked the same shift confirmed that Emily appeared normal, showed no signs of distress or tension, and left the store at her usual time. The last two customers who shopped before the store reduced operations were also interviewed. They described Emily as polite, communicating normally, and showing no signs of trouble. None of them saw any strangers following or lingering near the entrance area. After leaving the store, Emily was believed to have headed home along her familiar route, and determining her movement on that stretch became the priority task that morning. At the Putney Road intersection near Riverside Drive, police found an independent witness, a man driving north around 9:30 p.m. He stated he had seen a teenage girl matching the description walking close to the edge of the road, stepping steadily but slowly, and far from the residential area. This was the only direct observation of Emily on the road after leaving the store, so police recorded the exact position where the witness saw her, using it as the central benchmark for the timeline. To further clarify movement flow on the route at that time, police reviewed traffic activity by contacting drivers who regularly passed through that section of Putney Road during similar time frames. Several night shift drivers from local transport businesses were asked about when they drove through the area to establish vehicle volume and check if anyone had seen Emily or any unusual situations. This data helped create a list of vehicle appearance timestamps, allowing police to analyze whether there were unusual gaps that could allow an incident, such as a strange vehicle stopping or a collision, unnoticed. Each statement was cross-referenced across three axes: observation time, exact location, and witness direction of travel. Police created a summary table, marking matching points in color and separating uncertain or mismatched points for further checking. When piecing the data together, they obtained a relatively accurate time frame, from 9:20 p.m. to around 9:32 p.m. Emily was confirmed to have left the store and moved steadily toward home. After 9:32 p.m., no witness could definitively place her location. By around 9:32 p.m., vehicles passing through Putney Road reported no pedestrians matching the description. Based on the abnormal disappearance within less than 10 minutes, police established the window of disappearance as occurring between 9:32 p.m. and 9:40 p.m., during which the likelihood of an incident was highest. Pinpointing these exact 8 minutes became the foundation for developing a focused search strategy in the next phase, as it significantly narrowed the spatial area where Emily could have vanished while ruling out areas where witnesses had confidently observed nothing unusual during overlapping times. Based on the established time frame and the possible incident zone, patrol forces deployed a search that very night along Putney Road, extending to the West River Bridge area, concentrating on points with weak lighting and narrow road sections where pedestrians could easily fall out of view. Patrol vehicles used high-beam headlights to continuously sweep both shoulders for signs of dropped items, drag marks, skid marks, or any ground disturbance. Near the bridge area, officers used handheld flashlights to check the road edge adjacent to the guardrail, as this was a spot with fast-moving traffic and curved road structure that could obscure drivers' views, but no signs of collision or debris indicating a traffic incident were found. Another team walked along the riverbank below the bridge, checking for the possibility of the victim slipping down, but the ground showed no fresh depressions, no long skid marks, or signs of a pedestrian losing balance. In parallel, the K-9 unit was deployed in the opposite direction from the last witness sighting point. The police dog picked up an initial scent and moved a short distance along the right shoulder of Putney Road, but lost it after a few dozen meters, likely due to strong cold wind blowing from the river and scattered vehicle traffic dispersing the scent. The K-9 was brought back to the starting point 3 times, but showed no improvement, limiting the ability to determine exact direction of travel under late-night conditions. Police continued expanding the search along both shoulders, checking low bushes and small intersections leading into residential areas, but found no personal items such as the cross-body bag, books, or torn fabric, nor secondary scene signs like disturbed soil or newly formed paths. One patrol unit checked the empty parking area north of the bridge, where trucks occasionally parked at night, but recorded no unusual tire tracks or oil leaks. Summarizing all nighttime observations, the preliminary report concluded that there were no signs indicating Emily had been in a traffic accident or had voluntarily left the main road near the bridge. This further highlighted the short time frame in which she vanished from all observation. From the nighttime search results and timeline data, the field commander determined the need to expand the search perimeter into the adjacent Green Mountain Forest area the following morning, as it was the only area not yet accessed under sufficient light and could contain scene traces undetectable in the dark. On the morning of the second day, with better lighting and temperature conditions, the K9 unit was redeployed from the last position where Emily was seen to identify a clearer scent trail than the night before. In the very first attempt, the working dog picked up a stable signal extending over 50 meters along the right edge of Putney Road before changing direction into a natural trail leading into the forest, where the terrain was lower and more damp. This was the first time the K9 showed a consistent response, indicating the possibility that Emily had left the main road instead of continuing toward the residential area. The search team recorded the starting point of the redirection with map coordinates and proceeded deeper along the trail for several hundred meters before discovering shoe prints on the soft soil, still remaining from rain 2 days earlier. The shoe prints matched the size Emily typically wore, and the tread pattern also aligned with the type of JanSport athletic shoes the family confirmed she was wearing on the day she went missing. Although not of absolute identification value, these prints were the first physical evidence suggesting the victim's direction of travel may have deviated from the main road during the time she was lost from sight. Police immediately marked the location with signal stakes, photographed the scene, and measured the print sizes, then continued probing the surrounding area to determine if there was a continuous sequence of footprints. Along the trail, 2 additional faint prints were recorded, each separated by a few meters, suggesting the victim may have continued moving in the same direction before the trail was interrupted in drier ground. All these points were entered into the scene map, forming a preliminary movement path leading from the main road into Green Mountain Forest. Given the forest terrain with many branching paths and rapidly changing slopes, the field commander decided to divide forces into 3 groups to avoid missing areas. The first group was assigned to the northeast axis, where the trail led into gently sloping and more open terrain. The second group, the east axis, advancing into denser areas with many fallen trees and large rocks. The remaining group swept the southeast area, where the low, seasonally water-collecting terrain posed risks. Each group was equipped with large-scale maps, communication sets, and scene-marking equipment to ensure all findings were centrally recorded at the command point. During the directional split, police reassessed all terrain factors to establish a Level 2 search perimeter, expanding beyond the Level 1 perimeter that had focused only around Putney Road and the West River bank. The new perimeter included the entire narrow forest strip along the trail where the prints appeared, plus small valleys at risk of concealing evidence if an incident occurred. From the recorded coordinates, they constructed a primary search triangle, with the first vertex at the last sighting position on Putney Road, the second at the K9 redirection point into the forest, and the third at the farthest discovered print. This triangle served as the core search framework, considered the highest probability area containing necessary traces to better understand Emily's movement during the missing time. The search team continued sweeping strips of land in sequence from outer to inner, using probing rods to check soft soil patches, large tree roots, and places that could retain footprints or fabric scraps if the victim tripped or was dragged. Although no additional Emily belongings were recorded at nearby locations, the discovery of the footprint sequence provided important grounds for police to strengthen the hypothesis that Emily had left the lit road and entered the forest under circumstances yet to be determined. When compiling all data received from the K9, footprints, terrain direction, and disappearance timeframe, authorities completed the update to the Level 2 search perimeter and adjusted the day's deployment plan to push deeper into the inner Green Mountain Forest region, assessed as likely to hold the next traces of the victim. After completing the Level 2 perimeter expansion, the search groups began advancing deeper into the forest in the direction the footprint sequence indicated Emily may have moved before disappearing. The natural trail leading into the forest in this area was not a commonly used path by local residents. The ground was uneven, covered with thick layers of fallen leaves that easily concealed traces. The first team followed the northeast axis, keeping close to the trail and checking both sides to determine if the victim had turned in another direction or encountered an obstacle forcing a route change. The second team advanced into the steeper eastern area, where fallen trees and large rocks increased slip risks. The third team moved southeast, staying close to the low, damp terrain likely to retain traces if an incident occurred. As they progressed several hundred meters deeper, the terrain changed noticeably. The ground shifted to gravel-mixed soil, with the slope gradually increasing as they approached the lower slopes of Green Mountain. A narrow stream flowed diagonally across the trail, leading downstream toward West River. The search team paused to check the water's edge and potential slip points, but found no new footprints in the damp mud or signs of dropped objects. Continuing along the trail, they noticed the terrain ahead split into two branches, one leading up a rocky slope with many sharp outcrops, the other veering down into a depression near the dry stream bed. The groups communicated via radio and agreed to sweep both branches simultaneously to minimize missing high-value areas for determining Emily's final direction. The team ascending the rocky slope moved slowly due to the uneven rock surface, dense brush, and many spots lacking secure footing. Near a large rock slab blocking the path, one search team member spotted a dark green object draped between two boulders, partially covered by dry leaves. After clearing the leaves in a quick check, they identified it as a heavy fabric jacket, matching the description the family provided of what Emily was wearing when leaving work. The jacket had mud stuck to the lower body, with one sleeve showing wear and a small tear. The discovery location was on a slope of approximately 45 degrees, where items could easily slide down if dropped from higher up. Recognizing this as potentially important evidence, the field team leader ordered an on-site collection report. They recorded GPS coordinates, took overall and close-up photos, marked the area with signal tape, and noted the evidence condition before moving it. The jacket was placed in a sealed evidence bag, classified as evidence number 1, with notes on terrain, degree of coverage, and possible weather impact. The discovery of the jacket on the rocky slope created a new benchmark in analyzing Emily's direction of travel, while opening the hypothesis that the victim may have left the trail and moved up the slope, or been pulled, pushed, or slid down from a higher position. After completing on-site procedures, the search team surveyed the surrounding area to determine if there were scrape marks, disturbed soil, or remaining faint footprints on flat rock surfaces. Some minor scratches on the rock surface were noted, but they could not yet be concluded as related to the jacket or natural causes. However, the jacket's location was not a place easily reached by wind or random fall, as the terrain required passing many rough points to reach it. This led authorities to assess the rocky slope area as likely the site of an incident, whether accident, stumble, or external action. The new assessment helped narrow the focused search perimeter, shifting emphasis from the forest trail to the rocky slope and more rugged terrain above. From here, the scene map was updated with a key marker connecting data from the K9 and tree forest footprints and the first evidence found on the rocky slope. With Emily's jacket appearing at a difficult-to-access area, search forces clearly determined that this zone had a high probability of containing clues about the victim's final movement before disappearing, and required expanded multi-level elevation checks in the subsequent steps of the search. The code seized at the rocky slope area was immediately transferred to the Vermont State Police Laboratory for preliminary analysis using techniques available in 1989, with the goal of determining what information this evidence could provide about the events leading up to Emily's disappearance. First, the technician recorded the entire external condition of the coat. The lower body had multiple layers of dried mud mixed with fine sandy soil, most likely adhered from contact with the ground at a high-slope location. The two sleeves showed differing degrees of soiling, with the left sleeve having significantly more mud adhesion, while the right sleeve only had light scratches on the outer fabric. The frayed and torn areas lacked symmetrical patterns, suggesting they were not caused by repeated mechanical impact from machinery or vehicles, but were more likely the result of random friction with rocks or branches. The technician used cold light to examine the fabric surface and discovered a scratch approximately 2 inches long on the back body panel, but not deep enough to penetrate the lining layer, indicating the force of impact was likely not excessive. The next step focused on collecting loose fibers and soil samples adhering to the coat. Mud and soil were separated manually using a soft brush, tweezers, and collection trays to avoid disturbing the original composition of the samples. Soil samples were categorized by their attachment locations on the coat, to compare differences between soil on the sleeves and on the body, thereby assessing whether the victim had contact with different types of terrain. Comparison of these soil samples with geological data from the rocky slope area showed the main components included gravelly soil, rock fragments, and a layer of decayed leaf humus, consistent with the actual conditions at the location where the evidence was found. The technician also noted the presence of small plant fiber fragments adhering to the coat's edges, but these fibers lacked distinctive identifying characteristics as they belonged to common forest materials in the Green Mountain region. Examination of stains under a magnifying glass revealed no visible signs of blood or bodily fluids, at least in areas observable to the naked eye or under low magnification. However, in 1989, the laboratory lacked the capability to perform DNA analysis to identify the biological origin of any potential trace samples on the coat, so the complete absence of biological traces could not be verified. Additionally, no usable fingerprints or unusual fibers were found at a level clear enough to serve as a basis for identifying another individual. All these observations led to one important conclusion. The evidence did not provide sufficient information to determine direct interaction factors, such as the presence of a third party at the time the coat was left behind. Fiber analysis showed the coat had undergone friction, but it was impossible to determine whether this resulted from a fall, being dragged, or an unintentional impact during movement. The soil samples and soiling patterns were consistent with the terrain where the evidence was discovered, but did not help establish from what position or by what mechanism the coat fell. This created a major limitation. It was impossible to accurately infer the victim's movement dynamics at the moment the coat separated from her body, nor to obtain data reflecting a state of conflict, coercion, or accident. The technical report therefore concluded that while the coat, as the first piece of evidence and valuable in identifying the incident area, still did not provide strong enough information to determine the mechanism of disappearance or link it to any potential suspect. The lack of DNA analysis technology and forensic microbiology tools at the time meant all findings remained at the level of describing the current state, without allowing deeper conclusions about behavior, interaction, or the degree of violence associated with the coat. The evidence was returned to the field investigation team as an indispensable piece in the overall picture, but was also clearly noted in the file. Insufficient basis to determine human factors or specific external forces. After completing the analysis of the first piece of evidence, the investigation team returned to compile all witness statements collected during the first 2 days to create a unified cross-reference framework, aiming to assess the reliability of each information source and identify potential inconsistencies. First, they categorized the statements into 4 groups: co-workers at Riverside Market, customers leaving the store near the time Emily finished her shift, residents traveling on Putney Road between approximately 9:20 and 9:40 p.m., and households living near the forest boundary area. Each statement was placed into a comprehensive timeline, cross-checked against confirmed data from sign-in logs, usual routes, and recorded positions from search teams. Statements lacking clear substantiation or inconsistent with terrain features, for example, claims of seeing a pedestrian in locations obscured from road view, were immediately discarded to avoid analysis noise. Some witnesses described the coat or clothing colors inconsistent with family-provided data, most likely due to misperception under limited lighting conditions. These were noted but marked as low reliability. When narrowed to the group of statements with the highest accuracy, the investigation team identified 2 key anchors: Emily leaving the store at 9:20 p.m., and an independent witness seen her around 9:30 p.m. on Putney Road. These were the 2 least contested time points, serving as the basis for evaluating the remaining statements. During a review, Dr. Lucas Hale's statement stood out because it contained a time and location that could potentially determine the direction of the investigation. Hale stated that he drove home via Putney Road after leaving his clinic relatively late on the day of the incident and happened to see a girl walking close to the right shoulder whom he believed to be Emily. However, when the investigation team compared this statement with the time he left the clinic according to that day's patient appointment log, a discrepancy of several minutes appeared relative to confirmed elements from other witnesses and traffic activity. A pickup truck driver passing through the same section at the same time stated he did not see Hale's car moving ahead of or behind him during a roughly 5-minute interval, despite the narrow road and relatively clear visibility in that section allowing good observation of vehicles. When combining these 2 statements, the investigation team noted an incompatibility between Hale's reported travel time and the actual traffic flow. Another inconsistency arose when comparing Hale's description of the turn direction from his clinic onto Putney Road. He said he chose north to head home, but the map indicated the most logical route was south, unless he had a special reason to detour. When asked why he chose north, Hale provided no clear reason, only saying, habit, while both clinic staff and the last patient stated he usually took the route toward the southern residential area. Although this could not yet be concluded as deception, the investigation team placed this inconsistency on the list of anomalies requiring further verification. When systematizing all data, the investigation team determined that Hale, according to his own statement, was the last person to see Emily on Putney Road before she vanished. No witness confirmed seeing Emily after the time he described, nor was any vehicle recorded as seeing an image matching her description on the subsequent section of road. This made Hale's statement the closing point of the timeline, and simultaneously positioned him as the most important witness, since the entire remainder of Emily's route after 9:30 p.m. fell into an unobserved zone. When the investigation team cross-referenced all statements with verified on-scene events, including shoe prints, canine scent direction, and the coat's location, they concluded that Hale's statement was both decisive for reconstructing the route and contained details insufficiently aligned to completely rule out the possibility that he played a role beyond that of a witness. Therefore, the investigation team added his name to the list of witnesses requiring re-verification and flagged the inconsistencies for continued checking in subsequent analytical steps. Based on the systematized data from witness statements, seized evidence, and the time frame of Emily's disappearance, the investigation team proceeded to analyze 3 hypothetical scenarios to identify the most plausible mechanism leading to the disappearance, thereby narrowing the investigative direction for the next phase. The first scenario considered was the possibility of an accident occurring on the road or in the adjacent forest. To evaluate this, police re-examined the entire section of Putney Road from Riverside Market to the forest boundary area, focusing on points with steep slopes, slippery ground, or areas adjacent to the riverbank. Search teams rechecked the flow of the West River at 2 points, under the bridge and in sediment areas near the shore, to determine whether a slip could have caused the victim to fall into the water and be carried away. However, the ground at suspected points showed no slide marks or sufficiently deep impressions to prove loss of balance, and the terrain at the rocky slope where the coat was found also provided no clear indication of a heavy fall, as there were no displaced marks or scattered items except for the coat itself. In addition, the investigation team contacted the local hospital and reviewed traffic accident reports from that day to ensure no unidentified pedestrian injury cases existed. All checks returned negative results, significantly reducing the likelihood of a natural accident or vehicle collision. The second scenario was the possibility that Emily voluntarily left on her own accord. To consider this, police examined Emily's entire bank accounts, spending logs, and recent activity records, including library book borrowing, semester exam schedules, and after-school club meetings. No withdrawal transactions were found, nor were there signs of preparation to leave home, such as packing belongings, personal notes, or letters to friends. The fact that she carried no long-term items beyond her usual small work bag further reinforced the assessment that she had no intention of going far or separating from her family. The investigation team also asked close friends about Emily's emotional state in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. All described her as focused on college plans and not facing serious social issues. There were no signs indicating the victim had motive to run away, and neither family nor school recorded any conflict significant enough to cause her to leave voluntarily. Another possibility raised was that Emily might have been lured by an acquaintance or stranger, but her communication records on the day of disappearance showed no unusual calls, messages, or appointments. Her social relationships were stable and transparent. The second scenario was therefore assessed as having low probability. The third scenario, and the final one evaluated, was the possibility that the victim was attacked or abducted, leading to a forced disappearance. This was the only scenario consistent with the appearance of discrete but connected data points, shoe prints leading into the forest, the canine's intermittent but consistent scent direction, and the coat's location at the rocky slope area, where the victim had no natural reason to move to in the dark of night. In this analysis, the investigation team noted one important factor. Emily's usual route was very short and within a familiar residential area. Suddenly deviating from the main path into the forest was abnormal behavior requiring explanation through external intervention or an uncontrolled emergency situation. When cross-referenced with Dr. Hale's statement, the only one claiming to have seen Emily in the close time frame before loss of trace, the investigation team did not rule out the possibility that the victim had encountered interference from another person, especially given that Hale's statement about route and travel time did not fully align with other witnesses. Along with this, several other factors reinforced this direction. No evidence indicated the victim carried the coat to the rocky slope area herself. The interrupted shoe prints midway could signal she was forced off the trail, and the 8-minute window in which Emily completely vanished from all observation was relatively short, consistent with the possibility of an individual approaching and moving her into an out-of-sight area. Synthesizing the three scenarios, the investigation team concluded that the accident possibility was low due to lack of terrain interaction signs. The voluntary departure possibility was very low as life data did not support it, while the possibility of external intervention or coercion best fit the existing facts. Therefore, the case file was updated with the primary investigative direction as forced disappearance, serving as the basis for subsequent analytical steps to focus on identifying individuals who could have accessed the victim in the short time frame before loss of trace. After determining the primary investigative direction as forced disappearance, the investigation team returned to analyze Dr. Jerry Lucas Hale's role with a higher level of detail, as he was the last witness to report seeing Emily before the loss of trace and the only person present within the 8-minute window of disappearance. The investigation team created a separate timeline chart for Hale based on his statement, patient appointment log at the clinic, and the building's closing time where the clinic was located. When cross-referencing these facts with statements from the pickup truck driver and residents passing through Putney Road during the similar time frame, they discovered a 10 and 12-minute mismatch gap in Hale's travel time, coinciding with the period when Emily was no longer recorded by any other witness. Hale claimed he left the clinic around 9:25 p.m. and proceeded north on Putney Road, but the final appointment log showed he finished the examination at 9:10 p.m., and clinic staff stated he usually left the building just minutes after seeing off the last patient. When compared with the pickup truck driver's statement passing through Putney Road at 9:28 p.m., this person saw no sign of Hale's vehicle ahead or behind on the narrow, easily observable section. This created a period during which Hale's presence was not confirmed by any independent witness, while he himself asserted seeing Emily during that same window. The investigation team noted this as an inconsistency requiring continued verification, as it suggested Hale may have traveled in a different direction than claimed or had some unreported activity. To supplement information, officers checked the distance from Hale's clinic to the location where he claimed to have seen Emily. Average travel time under that evening's traffic conditions showed the distance typically took about 3 minutes. However, if Hale left the clinic earlier than stated, he could have passed through the Putney Road area before other independent witnesses saw Emily. This raised two possibilities. Either the timing of Hale seeing Emily was inaccurate as he described, or he appeared in the area earlier, but did not fully disclose it. The investigation team next examined Hale's alibi for the remaining minutes of that evening. He claimed he drove straight home without stopping, but no witness confirmed his vehicle's appearance in the residential area near his home, nor was there camera footage or tracking device evidence to support this. The lack of a solid alibi combined with a blank period in the timeline made Hale an individual requiring deeper scrutiny. To broaden the approach, 2 officers were assigned to observe his clinic during business hours to identify conditions potentially related to the disappearance. During informal observation, they noted a small X-ray room at the back of the clinic where walls were lined with rolled lead sheets, a material commonly used for radiation shielding but which could also exist as surplus or scrap if not fully utilized. Some lead rolls in the room showed signs of having been cut, though the timing and purpose were unclear. Additionally, while observing the rear hallway of the clinic, officers noted a faint chemical odor emanating from the instrument processing room, reasonable in a medical environment, but noteworthy in an investigative context. When questioning clinic staff, they confirmed the X-ray room had seen little use in recent months due to reduced patient volume, but no one recalled handling lead materials or reasons for cutting certain sheets. These observations could not be considered evidence, but they added another anomaly regarding physical facilities that could be relevant to misconduct if present. Nevertheless, the investigation team lacked sufficient grounds to request a formal search warrant, as no evidence or statement directly linked Hale to the coat discovery site or the shoe print locations in the forest. His status as the last witness to see Emily carried only informational value, not grounds for charges. Inconsistencies in his statement were recorded but remained within the realm of explainable by memory error or reasonable time confusion. Clinic observation only showed the presence of lead materials and chemical odor common elements in medical facilities and not indicative of criminality. Therefore, the investigation team concluded that although Hale was a potential suspect based on position, timing, and lack of clear alibi, the current factors were insufficient to request a clinic search or expanded questioning as an official suspect. Instead, the file was updated with a note that he belonged to the person of interest group, requiring continued close monitoring and scrutiny and subsequent analytical steps as additional relevant data emerged. When the investigation team reviewed the entire case file to assess the completeness and reliability of initial data, a series of overlooked leads gradually emerged, revealing why the case stalled early on. The first point concerned the statement of a construction worker who had worked at Dr. Hale's clinic a few weeks before Emily's disappearance. This person stated that during X-ray room repairs, he left some surplus laid sheets, but later noticed a portion had been cut small and was no longer in the original storage location. As this was specialized material rarely used casually, the worker informed clinic staff, but this information was not forwarded to investigators in the early phase, and his note only appeared in the file appendix several weeks after the statement was taken, at a time when the investigation team no longer had sufficient manpower to follow up on minor details. When the file was re-examined, this record was flagged as an unprocessed lead. But because no direct connection existed between the lead material and the coat discovery site, it was downplayed in the initial review. The second lead involved statements about noises in the forest on the night Emily disappeared. 3 households near the Green Mountain forest edge reported hearing sounds resembling footsteps or gravel sliding on the ground between approximately 9:35 and 9:40 p.m., coinciding with the identified window of disappearance. However, these statements were excluded from the main file as deemed insufficiently distinct from common wildlife activity in the area. One resident even reported hearing what sounded like low human speech but could not distinguish male or female. These facts, lacking definitiveness, were initially dismissed, but when aggregated, they could align with the K-9's determined direction the following day. The third weakness stemmed from the collection and preservation process of shoe prints found at the forest entrance. On the morning of the second day, a novice officer was assigned to photograph and cast the prints, but due to damp weather and inexperience, the cast was incomplete, rendering subsequent comparative analysis unreliable forensically. Even the original shoe print photos were stored only in internal documents and not duplicated according to proper evidence preservation standards. When the file was transferred to higher investigative levels, these items were deemed not meeting standards for comparison with any individual's footwear, including Emily's, despite the on-scene shoe prints being one of the most important indicators of the victim's movement direction. Another issue involved the lack of uniformity in recording information from search teams. Due to the wide terrain and dispersed forces, many on-scene notes were not centralized into a single unified point on the day, leading to some initial coordinates being entered incorrectly or belatedly into the master map. This made reconstructing Emily's path, or the direction matching and approaching subject's path, difficult to achieve accurately in the critical early hours. Additionally, the failure to thoroughly check higher slope areas beyond the coat discovery site, as search teams focused on lower trails, caused potential traces to be missed and irretrievable due to overnight weather effects. Finally, the lack of in-depth cross-checking of Hale's statement against traffic data and other witnesses' timelines revealed a major weakness in the initial analysis phase. His reported time driving on Putney Road was treated as sufficiently reliable without independent verification, and therefore his role in the disappearance was not properly assessed. Although minor inconsistencies were noted, they were not linked to the forced disappearance direction, causing the investigative focus to dilute and lose concentration. Synthesizing all overlooked leads, the review team concluded that the combination of evidence recording errors, premature exclusion of potential statements, and inadequate evaluation of Hale's behavior were the primary reasons the case failed to achieve a breakthrough in the early stage. These factors, upon re-examination, all had the potential to play pivotal roles in narrowing suspect scope and reconstructing the events of Emily's disappearance, but were not properly exploited at the time, contributing to the investigation's prolonged stalemate. After compiling the overlooked clues and reevaluating all available data, the investigative team was forced to confront the reality that despite expanding the search radius, analyzing evidence, reviewing statements, and examining inconsistencies related to Dr. Hale, they still lack sufficient information to take any decisive further step. Over the 6 weeks since Emily disappeared, no additional physical evidence was found in the Green Mountain Forest or the surrounding Putney Road area. The single shoe print could not be used as legal evidence, and the seized jacket provided no new investigative leads. Although officers continued repeated search sweeps along the slopes and river edges in the following days, the transition from late fall to early winter weather made the terrain increasingly inaccessible, with fresh fallen leaves and early ice completely covering potential traces. The helicopter search operation was maintained for a short additional period, but recorded no signs of the victim. In parallel with the terrain sweeps, the investigative team continued supplemental interviews with residents living near the forest, but no new statements or verifiable data emerged to recheck key timelines. The report of noises in the night of the incident was removed from the main file, and by the time the team wanted to re-exploit those sources, too much time had passed since the event for verification to retain value. In the absence of clear progress, the budget and resources allocated to Emily Carter's missing persons case had to be gradually reduced to prioritize new cases. The Sheriff's Office and Vermont State Police reached a consensus that the case file could not continue active investigation without new physical evidence or new witnesses appearing. Therefore, after 6 weeks of effort without breakthrough, the main file was officially suspended and all documents, scene notes, search maps, evidence photos, and witness statements were transferred to the Vermont State Cold Case Unit for archiving and future handling should additional data emerge. The file was classified under the category Unresolved Missing Juvenile Case, Active Review Pending New Evidence, meaning the case remained open but was no longer under active investigation. In the years that followed, the file was periodically reviewed whenever similar cases occurred or when authorities screened unresolved missing persons cases. However, from 1989 through early 2013, no new evidence related to Emily surfaced. No one reported finding personal items, fabric pieces, or relics that could be linked to her, and no new witnesses came forward with valuable information. Efforts to keep the case in the annual review category consistently led to the same conclusion: insufficient data to reopen the investigation. Over 24 years, the Emily Carter file became one of the longest-standing unresolved missing persons cases in Windham County, with documents preserved in legal standard storage awaiting a new opportunity to break the impasse that had persisted since the earliest days of the investigation. In early spring 2013, as the thick months-long ice on the northern slopes of Green Mountain began to thaw, a local hunter, while scouting an old trail, discovered a strange object, half buried and half exposed under accumulated damp soil and decayed leaves. Approaching closer, he realized it was a heavily deteriorated fabric backpack, with the outer material rotted through in many places, a rusted zipper, and straps nearly detached. Despite more than 2 decades of weather, wildlife, and snow rain exposure deforming the backpack, some contents remained basically identifiable, recognizing that this was not a recently lost item. Given the degree of degradation far exceeding a few years, the hunter immediately reported it to Vermont State Police. Upon arrival, authorities cordoned off the area, took overall photographs, and seized the backpack following evidence protocol. Inside the backpack, after technicians carefully opened each compartment, they noted 3 groups of still identifiable items: a set of school notebooks with a few pages still legible showing the name Emily C. written in faded ballpoint pen along the edge, a simple silver necklace with a starred pendant, an item the family had previously described when Emily went missing, and a small plastic container holding several capsules, the shells discolored but intact, including at least one cracked capsule revealing a grayish metallic fragment inside. None of the items showed signs of recent movement, indicating the backpack had likely remained undisturbed at the location for a very long time. The entire backpack and contents were transported to the Cold Case Unit's evidence storage for preliminary evaluation. Based on initial identification from the notebooks and necklace, investigators were nearly certain the backpack belonged to Emily Carter, as the family had reported Chu's carrying a school notebook and a commemorative necklace given by her mother on her 16th birthday. Investigators examined the handwriting on the pages, comparing it to archived signature and test samples from Emily, and confirmed a very high degree of similarity despite the faded ink. This match provided strong supporting evidence that the backpack was directly related to the victim in the 1989 disappearance. The plastic container with the capsules containing the metallic fragment was specially noted by forensic specialists, as neither the container type nor the capsules appeared among any items Emily was reported to have carried when leaving Riverside Market. The presence of a capsule with a metallic fragment drew the team's attention, but without deeper analysis yet possible. They simply recorded it as an anomaly requiring closer examination. More notably, the discovery location of the backpack was approximately a few hundred meters as the crow flies from the rocky slope area, where Emily's jacket was found in 1989 and at a lower elevation. This suggested the backpack may have been left along the same path of movement, or through the same mechanism that separated the jacket from the victim earlier. When synthesizing all new evidence data with the old file, the cold case unit recognized this as the first significant discovery in over 2 decades, and the only direct physical evidence besides the jacket linked to Emily. This was sufficient to trigger the full case reevaluation protocol under reopening standards. To ensure legal integrity, the team drafted a supplemental report, classified the backpack as evidence 2, and prepared a recommendation to reactivate the file. An internal cold case unit meeting followed shortly thereafter, during which investigators presented reasons to conclude that the backpack discovery created a high likelihood of new analytical directions because, first, the backpack's location overlapped with the initial search area, but fell outside the thoroughly swept zone in 1989. Second, the contents had strong identifying characteristics. And third, the appearance of a capsule containing a metallic fragment was anomalous compared to all previously known data. Investigators agreed that while the backpack did not directly explain the events of the night Emily disappeared, it raised questions about the victim's direction and state of movement and indicated the possible existence of other undiscovered evidence. Ultimately, the cold case unit commander officially signed the decision to reactivate the Emily Carter investigation in April 2013, moving the file from archive status to active investigation status. Marking the first time in 24 years the disappearance was re-examined with the expectation of addressing the initial investigative shortcomings from 1989. Immediately after reactivation, the cold case unit transferred all new evidence, including the backpack, notebooks, necklace, and especially the container with capsules containing the metallic fragment, to the Vermont State Forensic Laboratory for analysis, using modern techniques unavailable in 1989. The first objective was to extract DNA from any materials capable of retaining biological traces after more than 2 decades exposed to the natural environment. During backpack examination, technicians discovered a hair with intact roots still adhered to the lining fabric in the main compartment, likely protected from weather exposure, and thus retaining sufficient genetic material for analysis. The hair sample underwent DNA extraction via polymerase chain reaction, and the resulting profile was compared to family DNA records collected and archived after 2000. The nucleotide sequence showed complete match with Emily Carter's profile, confirming not only that the backpack belonged to her, but also that it had been used close to the time of disappearance, as the hair retained its root with lower degradation than expected for 24-year-old evidence. This result formally solidified the backpack's legal value as evidence directly linked to the victim. Next, forensics focused on the cracked capsule revealing the metallic fragment. Using optical microscopy, they determined the fragment was dull gray, soft, and brittle when lightly scraped, ruling out common steel or aluminum alloys used in personal items. A small sample was cut and analyzed via X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, yielding a composition almost entirely lead with high purity, and a material structure consistent with rolled sheet lead used in medical X-ray shielding equipment. To clarify whether the metallic fragment originated from Dr. Hale's clinic, investigators collected lead samples from the X-ray room walls based on 1989 records of radiation shielding repair work. Comparison of XRF spectra from both samples showed near-perfect elemental composition match and characteristic trace impurities, a form of metallic fingerprint, indicating they came from the same industrial material type. Additionally, the fracture edge of the lead fragment in the capsule exhibited cut structures similar to those on lead samples cut from the clinic, which had been sliced with sharp tools for repair needs. The analysis results led investigators to note clearly this was the first scientific evidence in the entire file establishing a physical link between the victim and an environment under Dr. Hale's control. Meanwhile, the forensic geology team analyzed soil samples from the backpack base, as the soil adhering to the corners retained original grain structure due to long-term coverage. This soil was compared to the library of samples archived during the 1989 investigation, including soil from the rocky slope where the jacket was found and points within the secondary search radius. Mineralogical and grain size analysis via scanning electron microscopy showed the backpack soil matched highly with soil collected from a location about 300 meters north of the jacket discovery point, in the transition zone between two characteristic gravel-humus terrain bands. This was highly significant because that area lay outside the direct 1989 search zone, but still within the contiguous forest area that rescue teams had not thoroughly examined due to manpower and complex terrain limitations. The backpack's appearance at a location consistent with the old soil sample indicated it had remained stable in the area for many years without recent external displacement. When compiling all forensic data into a joint report, the cold case unit recognized that for the first time in nearly a quarter-century of investigation, a legally robust chain of connections had emerged. DNA from the hair confirmed the victim. The backpack location aligned with the suspected movement path, and especially the lead fragment matched the source material from Dr. Hale's X-ray room, the same individual with conflicting statements and the last known person to see the victim. The combination of biological, materials, and geological data created the breakthrough the 1989 investigation could not achieve due to technological limitations. The forensic report concluded that the new evidence not only proved the backpack belonged to Emily, but also provided a material connection between the victim and a location directly tied to Hale. This was the first sufficiently strong legal basis to question his true role in the disappearance and opened an entirely new analytical direction for the team, which previously could only rely on statements and scattered scene traces without scientific corroboration. For the first time since 1989, the case had a solid foundation allowing linkage of scene, evidence, and a specific individual, marking a critical turning point in the pursuit of truth regarding Emily Carter's disappearance. After obtaining the new forensic data, the cold case unit reconstructed the entire timeline using GIS technology and modern movement modeling to more precisely determine the possible distance and timing of any interaction between Emily and Dr. Hale. The team digitized all 1989 Green Mountain topographic maps, integrating new data layers from the 2013 backpack discovery site, the matching soil area, and the jacket location, creating a high-resolution mapping system. From this, they ran simulations of Emily's feasible walking paths based on average walking speed, confirmed departure time, and the last independent witness sighting. The model showed Emily could only have moved within a narrow corridor extending from Putney Road into the forest between approximately 9:20 and 9:32 p.m., and could not have been at any location significantly off that route, in the short time frame Hale's statement implied. In parallel, the team reconstructed Hale's likely travel route based on his reported clinic departure time, distance to the Putney Road area, average vehicle speed, and other witnesses' traffic data. Running dozens of different movement scenarios, the GIS system showed no plausible model in which Hale could have encountered Emily as he described. If he left the clinic at the time he claimed, he would have arrived at Putney Road too late to see Emily at the independently described location. If he left earlier as suggested by patient records, he would have passed that road segment before Emily appeared on it, making it impossible to see her coming from the opposite direction. All simulations indicated the chance encounter statement was inconsistent with geographic reality and feasible travel paths. Furthermore, when overlaying the forensic data, particularly the lead fragment matching Hale's X-ray room with Emily's modeled path, investigators noted a clear alignment between the suspected route and the locations of found evidence, the jacket on the upper slope and the backpack at a lower point, along the same downward extension into the forest interior. Combining time and location models, they constructed a composite line of travel showing the possibility that Emily was forced off the main road and moved in a direction inconsistent with natural nighttime pedestrian behavior. The team then modeled Hale's line of travel under the assumption of his intervention in Emily's route. When incorporating vehicle speed, access capability, and his unaccounted time window, the model pinpointed the only feasible window for direct interaction as precisely the window of disappearance from 9:32 to 9:40 p.m. GIS analysis showed that if Emily was compelled to leave Putney Road through coercive action, her subsequent movement path fully aligned with the lead to the first jacket discovery site, then followed the downslope terrain to the backpack location. From there, the system ruled out voluntary entry into the forest to reach the backpack site via a natural route, Emily would have had to choose turns that nighttime pedestrian behavior modeling deemed implausible, especially since the forest area became nearly completely dark after 9 p.m. in October. Incorporating the forensic lead fragment data into the model, investigators determined the probability of its presence in the backpack through natural means was near zero. Its presence was only logical if the victim had direct or indirect contact with a lead source from an X-ray room, an uncommon environment for a teenager. Synthesizing all factors, the team built a scenario-based timeline, an integrated timeline grounded in GIS, forensic, and behavioral data. The model's conclusion was, Emily did not voluntarily deviate from her route. Emily was intervened with by an actor capable of rapid movement and forest access, and the evidence trail indicated non-voluntary movement. From this, for the first time in 24 years, the cold case unit issued a formal determination that the most reasonable model was abduction and transport. The victim was approached on Putney Road, forcibly removed from the main route, and transported to the forest area, where evidence items were separated from her body in sequence according to terrain: jacket at the higher point, backpack at the lower. Most importantly, after running simulations of over 100 route variants, the GIS system produced one standout result. Within the entire suspect area, only one individual had reported presence, possessed a vehicle, had an unaccounted time window, and had an indirect forensic connection to the victim, Dr. Lucas Hale. The new timeline, supported by modern data, completely eliminated the possibility that he was merely a passer by chance and, for the first time, placed him at the center of an abduction model in the Emily Carter file. Based on the modern timeline model and the new forensic evidence chain, the cold case unit has determined that there is sufficient legal basis to elevate the suspicion level against Dr. Lucas Hale from person of interest to primary suspect, and to draft a request for a search warrant covering his entire medical clinic. The warrant application file rests on three critical pillars. First, DNA analysis results from hair found in the backpack, proving the evidence is directly linked to victim Emily. Second, materials analysis showing that the metal fragment in the capsule matches lead sheets used in Hale's X-ray room. And finally, the GIS movement model establishing that Hale's chance encounter statement is inconsistent with actual geography and timing. These three elements were deemed strong enough to convince the district judge to approve a comprehensive search warrant. Within 24 hours of the warrant being signed, the investigative team conducted the search of Hale's clinic in the early morning to ensure he had no opportunity to move or destroy evidence. The forensic team was divided into three groups. The first examined the X-ray room, the second inspected the instrument processing area and storage, and the third surveyed hallways and surfaces capable of retaining biological traces. Upon entering the X-ray room, they quickly discovered several partially cut lead sheets, some of which showed sharp cut marks matching the characteristics of the lead fragment recovered from the capsule and the backpack. Based on matching composition and mechanical markings, the forensic team documented these as high-value evidence, sealed them in specialized containers to prevent oxidation, and entered them into the 2013 evidence catalog. In the instrument processing area, technicians used blue light illumination to examine floor surfaces and detected unusual cleaning patterns. Cleaning solution residue soaked into grout lines in uneven shapes, suggesting the floor had been vigorously scrubbed at specific spots rather than cleaned uniformly. Samples of the residue trapped in the grout were collected for analysis, including several very small gray-brown streaks not immediately visible to the naked eye. These traces did not prove anything independently, but were noted as indicators of irregular manipulation, especially when compared to the typical operating pattern of a small-scale clinic. While the team scanned surfaces likely to retain hair or epithelial cells, they found a long hair strand clinging to the leg of a storage shelf in the patient waiting area. The hair sample was immediately collected, packaged according to standard protocol, and sent to the lab. DNA analysis results returned several days later confirmed the hair fully matched Emily Carter's genetic profile. This was the most significant find of the search, as it directly linked the victim to the interior space of the clinical location, with no reason for Emily to have ever been present according to 1989 data. Combined with the cut lead sheets and floor washing signs, the cold case unit concluded that Hale's clinic contained multiple anomalies inexplicable by routine professional activity. All seized evidence, including partially cut lead fragments, floor solution samples, and the DNA-matched hair, was cataloged and sealed in the 2013 case file, expanding the inventory from evidence number 3 to 12 depending on classification. Everything was transferred to evidence storage under strict chain of custody protocols, ensuring usability in further investigation and prosecution steps. This search marked a major turning point. For the first time in 24 years, authorities found physical evidence directly connecting the victim to Dr. Hale in a context that could not be explained by random coincidence. The investigative team noted in the summary report that the warrant had provided physical evidence of linkage level, laying the foundation for deeper investigation and advancing the case further than at any point since 1989. After obtaining the direct evidence chain at the clinic and receiving DNA results confirming Emily's hair inside space under Dr. Lucas Hale's control, the cold case unit immediately coordinated with the prosecutor's office to draft an arrest warrant based on the preliminary charge of kidnapping resulting in death, applicable in long-term missing person cases where the law treats the victim as deceased due to criminal act. The arrest warrant was approved by the district judge in early June 2013, paving the way for law enforcement to proceed with the next step in the legal process. On an early morning, to minimize the risk of the subject reacting or destroying remaining evidence, Vermont State Police Tactical Team approached Hale's residence after confirming his presence via vehicle signal and household activity. As he stepped out the door to head to the clinic, authorities arrested him on the spot in the driveway, read him his rights, and informed him of the preliminary charges. Hale appeared surprised but did not resist. He was handcuffed and placed in a patrol vehicle while another team secured the area to conduct a search of his personal vehicle under the accompanying warrant issued earlier. The vehicle search focused on the trunk, floor mats, and surfaces capable of retaining soil or trace materials. When technicians sampled mud adhering to the undercarriage and wheel edges, they found soil color and texture similar to the type previously analyzed from Emily's backpack. The soil sample was sealed and sent to the lab for formal comparison. Subsequent analysis showed mineralogical composition matching the soil from the backpack discovery area, particularly the presence of rare trace mineral particles unique to the northern Green Mountain slope terrain. This finding confirmed that Hale's vehicle had been in an area he previously denied visiting, further strengthening suspicion of his direct involvement in transporting the victim or her belongings. After completing on-scene procedures, Hale was transported to the Windham County Detention Facility for pretrial processing. There, he underwent intake procedures, including fingerprinting, mug shots, and risk classification. Hale's attorney quickly arrived, demanding full access to his client and stating that he would answer no questions until fully informed of the basis for the charges. Nevertheless, the arrest allowed the cold case unit to expand the scope of inquiry and raise critical questions about travel routes, motive, and post-1989 concealment behaviors. Concurrently, the team prepared an interrogation dossier based on key inconsistencies, the time period lacking alibi, statements inconsistent with geographic modeling, the matching lead fragment from the clinic, and Emily's hair in controlled space. The dossier included GIS timeline charts and forensic comparison tables to ensure every question posed had clear evidentiary backing. These materials were prepared for the first interrogation session, which played a crucial role in assessing Hale's reactions and gathering additional information before formal prosecution. With the subject in custody, authorities maintained a cautious but confident stance that the new physical evidence chain would unravel the knot persisting for over 2 decades, moving the Emily Carter disappearance case into an entirely new investigative phase. In the interrogation room at the Windham County Detention Facility, the investigative team began the first formal session with Dr. Lucas Hale by presenting layers of data in the pre-planned sequence, aiming to create logical pressure that would force reactions and expose weaknesses in his statements. They started with a newly constructed GIS timeline, clearly demonstrating that the chance encounter with Emily claim was impossible under any reasonable movement pattern, as maps were projected on the wall with timestamps, distances, and travel speeds annotated. Hale remained silent but showed visible tension when questioned about the unalibied window from 9:22 to 9:40 p.m. Next, investigators presented forensic evidence from the clinic, beginning with the lead fragment in the capsule proven to match lead sheets from Hale's X-ray room. When the partially cut lead sheet was placed in front of him alongside XRF analysis results, Hale averted his gaze and requested a private conversation with his attorney. But the session continued as it was still evidence presentation, not direct cross-examination. Investigators moved to the DNA-matched hair from Emily found in the patient waiting area, stressing there was no reasonable explanation for a missing teenager's biological material to appear in his medical facility, a place she had never visited according to any official record. Hale responded by suggesting the hair could have fallen from someone else's clothing who had contact with the victim. An argument quickly countered when investigators presented the chain of custody documentation and described the hair's position on the back of the shelf, an area with no natural foot traffic. The interrogation reached its peak when the team brought in soil from Hale's vehicle undercarriage compared to samples from the backpack recovery site. Mineral charts, SEM images, and geological reports were presented item by item, proving the vehicle had been in an area he repeatedly denied visiting. Hale's expression changed markedly. His defensive posture softened into wary silence as investigators summarized. "You said you were never in that area, but your car was. How do you explain that?" Receiving no response, they shifted to direct confrontation. All evidence, the jacket, backpack, lead fragment, DNA hair, vehicle soil, was laid out in a row for psychological impact. Investigators did not accuse outright but emphasized, "We are reconstructing what happened. We need to know where Emily is." This was a pivotal shift in interrogation strategy, moving from accusation to locating remains, steering the subject toward possible mitigation rather than denial. The room fell completely silent as investigators posed the final question in the confrontation phase. "You were the last person to see her. You can help us end this." After more than 30 seconds of silence, Hale lowered his head, clasped his hands, and let out a heavy sigh, a classic psychological indicator of a suspect entering acceptance of undeniable reality. When asked again, this time in a lowered, persuasive rather than commanding tone, "Where is Emily?" Hale's fingers and lips began to tremble slightly. Then he requested a brief pause to speak with his attorney. The private exchange lasted only a few minutes. Upon returning to the table, he still avoided eye contact. Investigators continued stressing that silence would not alter forensic data, erase the timeline, or negate evidence. But cooperation could allow the victim's family to know the truth and give Hale the chance to present his account in the least interpreted way. In the final 10 minutes of the session, the combined pressure of evidence and psychological strategy reached a point where Hale could no longer sustain silence. He began speaking disjointedly, out of sequence, then paused, took a deep breath, and uttered the sentence that halted the entire room. "You'll find her on the north side of Green Mountain." Investigators pressed for a precise location, and after a few seconds of hesitation, Hale provided specific coordinates: a narrow, steep, hidden mountain crevice, not visible from the main trail, and never included in the 1989 search due to treacherous terrain. He described a leaf-covered entrance and piled soil used to conceal it. When asked to confirm whether Emily's body remained there, Hale gave a slight nod, the first clear sign of full acknowledgement, though not yet a complete confession. Immediately upon concluding the interrogation, the cold case unit contacted the state search and rescue team and mobilized terrain forensic units to prepare for large-scale exhumation. A lockdown order was issued for the northern Green Mountain slope, specialized vehicles deployed to reach the disclosed site. All information was kept strictly confidential, with forces placed on immediate standby, marking a critical turning point in the 24-year quest for truth about Emily Carter's disappearance. The forensic team and search unit set out the following morning, equipped with Hale's provided coordinates and specialized positioning gear to access the northern Green Mountain crevice, an area previously unsearched due to steep drops, rock slides, and thick leaf litter cover. Upon arrival, they used safety ropes to descend into the deep depression between rock faces. At the spot Hale described, the soil showed distinct color and texture differences from surroundings, indicating it had been disturbed and refilled. After clearing surface leaf litter and topsoil, the forensic team immediately located scattered human bone fragments clustered together, some still retaining basic anatomical connections. Conferring this as the original body deposition site, they collected each bone fragment following strict forensic protocol, marking position, depth, and condition for body reconstruction. Within less than 2 hours, the full skeletal remains were recovered, including skull, pelvis, long bones of both legs, and smaller upper limb bones. A lightly oxidized silver necklace was found lodged between two rib segments, a strong identifier suggesting the remains belonged to Emily. Residual fragments of fabric, bra, and metal zipper further supported this conclusion. Upon returning the remains to the forensic lab, specialists began identity verification by extracting DNA from a lower molar. Comparison with Emily's mother's DNA sample yielded near-perfect match, confirming the skeleton as victim Emily Carter, closing 24 years of searching for a truth her family had hoped for but never confirmed. Forensic pathologists then focused on trauma analysis to determine cause of death. They identified a straight-line fracture on the skull, characteristic of heavy impact from a small contact solid object. The third and fourth right ribs showed anterior to posterior fractures, indicating compressive or blunt force before death. No evidence of stabbing or sharp objects, nor signs of asphyxiation or natural fall. Expert conclusion clearly stated Emily died from blunt force trauma, causing central nervous system damage, consistent with intentional assault. Once the forensic report was finalized, the Vermont prosecutor's office immediately prepared trial documents. As physical evidence had moved beyond suspicion to direct proof of death mechanism and body location, both fully consistent with Hale's final interrogation statements, Lucas Hale's trial took place in Windham County Court in mid-2014, with full attendance by prosecutors, defense, jury, and victim's family. The prosecution opened by outlining the entire 24-year investigation, emphasizing three evidence pillars: forensic, timeline, and confession. They presented DNA from Emily's hair found in Hale's clinic, proving she had been inside a facility with no legitimate reason for her presence. Next, they showed analysis of the lead fragment from the backpack capsule, matching exactly with lead sheets from Hale's X-ray room, a pivotal detail since Hale had previously denied handling lead material near the time of the disappearance. Prosecutors also displayed GIS-reconstructed travel paths for Emily and Hale on the 1989 night, demonstrating the chance encounter claim was geographically impossible. Additionally, they introduced soil from Hale's vehicle undercarriage, matching the backpack site mineral profile, proving his vehicle had been where he repeatedly denied. Finally, prosecutors tied Hale's admission of the body location to forensic findings of death by external force, creating a tight, unbroken evidence chain directly linking the defendant to assault, transport, and concealment. The defense attempted to argue that 24 years could degrade samples and that Hale's body location statement was a psychological reaction to interrogation pressure rather than a confession. However, these arguments were swiftly undermined by the consistency of the forensic chain, timeline, and trace evidence, particularly DNA and microanalysis, unaffected by time in ways favoring the defendant. When deliberations began, the jury reached a verdict in under 6 hours. Dr. 6, Lucas Hale, guilty of murder in the second-degree murder, with intent to cause serious injury, resulting in death, but without premeditation. At sentencing, the judge highlighted the case's gravity. This was the taking of a teenager's life, the burial of truth for over 2 decades, and the obstruction of justice through false statements. The court imposed life imprisonment without the possibility of parole sentence, reflecting the prolonged nature, concealment efforts, and severe impact on the victim's family and Vermont community. As the sentence was read, Emily's family, who had waited nearly a quarter-century for truth, sat in silent tears. They could not call it a happy ending, but the uncertainty had ended, and Emily was finally laid to rest in a formal funeral afterward. Following the trial, Vermont State Police officially closed the Emily Carter case file per complete protocol. All evidence from the 1989 jacket to the 2013 backpack, lead fragment, soil samples, DNA data, and full forensic reports was archived in a comprehensive file spanning thousands of pages. The file was sealed with the official notation: case resolved, homicide, offender convicted. This ranks among Vermont's rare cold cases solved after more than 2 decades. Thanks to scientific advances and investigator persistence, the Emily Carter case, once a painful mystery in the Brattleboro community, was finally closed with justice served to the perpetrator and truth returned after being buried for far too many years beneath the cold soil of Green Mountain. The story of the Emily Carter case, spanning 24 years from an October night in 1989 until her remains were found in 2013, offers many important lessons for American society today, where technology has advanced but gaps in investigation, community awareness, and personal safety still persist. Emily's case began with a familiar scenario: a teenager walking home after a work shift on a road presumed safe and familiar. Her disappearance within a mere 8-minute window of disappearance reminds us that personal safety is always fragile, especially for women and minors. Today, as many young people still work late, walk alone, or travel through poorly lit areas, Emily's story underscores that safety measures, sharing location, traveling in groups, or notifying others of plans remain essential. Another lesson stems from initial investigative failures: footwear impressions improperly preserved, neighbor reports of forest noises overlooked, and especially Hale's inconsistent statements inadequately scrutinized. This reflects a recurring issue in the U.S. legal system. When small clues are downplayed, justice can be delayed for decades. It highlights the importance of investing in investigative resources, training in evidence handling, and applying modern forensic technology factors that later enabled the case to be solved through DNA, soil analysis, and GIS. Finally, the story emphasizes that crime can be concealed with great sophistication over long periods. But justice does not vanish, it simply awaits sufficient data to emerge. In a society increasingly reliant on science, this reinforces confidence that truth, no matter how delayed, can still come to light. If you are interested in cases that seemed forever lost, but were solved through justice and science, like Emily Carter's, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video where we continue exploring the journeys to uncover truth behind unsolved mysteries.